right. The year is 1968. Ford has just spent the last few years kicking Ferrari up and down the Mulsanne Straight. The GT40, a big, brawny American V8 monster, had done the impossible. It had won Le Mans, not just once, but again and again. It was a glorious thundering beast that showed the world what happens when Detroit gets properly angry. You could feel the ground shake when it went past. It was a proper car. The champagne had been sprayed, the trophies were polished, and everyone at Ford was feeling rather pleased with themselves. They had built a legend. But in the world of motorsport, the moment you start celebrating is the moment you lose. The men in blazers, the rule makers, decided things were getting a bit too fast. A bit too American. So, they did what they always do. They changed the rules. They announced that for the upcoming season, the big engine prototypes were out. No more 7-liter behemoths. The new limit was a paltry 3 liters. 3! That's less than you get in a family saloon these days. This was a disaster. Ford's mighty GT40 was suddenly a dinosaur, a magnificent relic from a bygone era. This single rule change sent shockwaves through the paddock. It was a complete reset. All that money, all that engineering genius that went into the GT40 program was suddenly obsolete for the main prize. Ford had a choice. They could pack up their toys and go home, content with their Le Mans victories. Or they could start again, build something entirely new. Something designed from the ground up for this new 3-liter formula. Being Ford, and not wanting to let Porsche and Ferrari have all the fun, they decided to fight. But this time, the weapon wouldn't be built in America. The challenge was handed over to a little company in Britain, a skunkworks operation called Allen Man Racing. They were tasked with creating a car that could take on the best in the world, but with less than half the engine capacity of the old GT40. The era of brute force was over. This new car had to be clever. It had to be light. It had to be nimble and aerodynamic. It was a whole new game, a completely different kind of war. And the car they came up with, well, it was something else entirely. It was the Ford F3L. Now, when you're told to build a 3-liter race car, you have a few options. You could develop a nice reliable V8 or V12, something sensible. But the chaps at Allen Man Racing weren't feeling sensible. They had a properly bonkers idea. They looked at the world of Formula One, which was already running 3-liter engines, and saw the Cosworth DFV. This engine was a masterpiece, light, powerful, and utterly dominant in Grand Prix racing. So they thought, why not stick one of those in an endurance car? It was a brilliantly simple and brilliantly risky plan. This was a bold move. The Cosworth DFV was a high-strung, screaming banshee of an engine. It was designed to run flat out for a couple of hours in a Grand Prix, not for 24 hours of relentless punishment at Le Mans. It vibrated like a pneumatic drill and was notoriously fragile. It was a sprinter, and they were asking it to run a marathon. Even the people at Cosworth, the very engineers who created it, warned them. They said flat out that the DFV was not built for endurance racing. They said it would shake itself to pieces. It was a warning that would prove to be spectacularly accurate. But the designers were convinced. The engine's small size and lightweight construction were too tempting to ignore. It allowed them to build a car that was impossibly low and sleek. The designer, Len Bailey, penned a body that looked like it had driven straight out of a science fiction film. It was all swooping curves and dramatic lines. It was stunningly beautiful. The cockpit was a tiny bubble, and the whole car sat so low to the ground it looked like it was hovering. It was a complete departure from the muscular GT40. This was a rapier, not a sledgehammer. The technical specifications were just as impressive as its looks. The chassis was a lightweight aluminum monocoque. The Cosworth engine was bolted directly to it, acting as a stressed member of the frame, a purebred racing technique. This made the car incredibly stiff and light, tipping the scales at a featherweight figure. On paper it was perfect. It had the most successful Formula One engine of its day, a chassis straight from the top drawer of motorsport engineering, and a body that could cheat the wind. It was, theoretically, a world beater, a car destined for greatness. When the Ford F3L, also known as the P68, was unveiled, jaws hit the floor. In an age of functional but often brutish-looking machines, this thing was a work of art. It was impossibly elegant. Its form was so pure, so uninterrupted by the clutter of wings and spoilers that would soon dominate racing. It had a futuristic quality, as if it had arrived from the year 2000. People didn't just see a race car, they saw a statement. It screamed speed even when it was standing still. This wasn't just a tool for winning, it was automotive sculpture, and arguably one of the most beautiful racing cars ever made. Its speed was as shocking as its looks. With the shriek of that Cosworth DFV behind the driver's head, the F3L was ferociously quick in a straight line. It had a tiny frontal area and that slippery body, which meant it had a massive top-speed advantage over its rivals from Porsche and Alfa Romeo. On the long straights of circuits like Le Mans or Spa, it would have been untouchable. It was a missile. The combination of its lightweight build and the raw power from its Formula One heart created a machine with absolutely blistering potential. It was a car that promised to dominate. However, there was a huge problem. That beautiful, clean shape generated almost no downforce. At high speeds, the car became dangerously unstable. Air would get underneath it, and the whole thing would try to take off like an airplane. The drivers reported that it was terrifying to drive, wandering all over the track at speeds where you really want a car to be planted to the tarmac. It was a classic case of form over function. The pursuit of aerodynamic purity and beauty had created a machine that was fundamentally flawed and frighteningly unpredictable. The engineers scrambled to fix it. Their solution was clumsy. They started bolting bits on. Spoilers appeared on the tail. Little winglets sprouted from the nose. Each addition was a desperate attempt to nail the car to the ground, but each one also compromised the original beautiful design. It was like watching someone draw a mustache on the Mona Lisa. The car got uglier, but it still didn't solve the fundamental instability. They were trying to patch a deep-seated aerodynamic flaw with sticking plasters, and it just wasn't working. The beautiful dream was quickly turning into an engineering nightmare. The car's first race was the 1968 BWAC 500 at Brands Hatch. Hopes were sky high. Two of these gorgeous machines were entered, and they immediately showed their incredible pace. In qualifying, they were blisteringly fast. Bruce McLaren put one on pole position, proving that the car's raw speed was no myth. It was quicker than the Porsches, quicker than everything else. The crowd was buzzing. It looked like Ford and Alan Mann Racing had pulled off a masterstroke. This beautiful, screaming machine was set to begin a new era of dominance, just as the GT40 had done before it. The green flag dropped, and the promise began to unravel almost immediately. The F3L driven by Jochen Rindt lasted less than 10 minutes. A driveshaft failed, and his race was over before it had even really begun. It was a disappointing but not entirely unexpected teething problem for a brand new car. All eyes were now on the second car, the pole sitter, driven by Bruce McLaren and Mike Spence. McLaren was leading, pulling away from the field, making the car look every bit the winner everyone had hoped it would be. For a few glorious laps, the F3L was fulfilling its destiny. But then, the curse of the Cosworth engine struck. That vibration, the one the engineers had warned about, was taking its toll. It wasn't just uncomfortable for the driver, it was systematically destroying the car around it. The engine, the gearbox, the electrics, everything was being shaken to bits. After about 4 hours of racing while running in a strong position, the second F3L's engine failed. It just gave up. Both cars, which had shown so much promise and were by far the fastest on the track, were out. They had failed to finish. This race set the pattern for the F3L's entire, tragically short career. It became known as the fastest car to never finish a race. It was a heartbreaker. At the next race, the Nürburgring 1,000 kilometer, one car crashed and the other retired with, you guessed it, engine failure. Then at Spa, another engine failure. The car was a glass cannon. It had unbelievable speed and devastating beauty, but it was cursed with a fragility that made it impossible for it to survive the brutal demands of an endurance race. Its reputation was sealed. It was the most beautiful loser in motorsport. So, what is the legacy of the Ford F3L? It never won a single race. In fact, it rarely even finished one. By any normal measure, it was a complete and utter failure, an expensive, glorious, and very public flop. The project was canned after just one season, a footnote in Ford's otherwise stellar racing history. The cars were sold off, confined to history as a failed experiment. The rulebook and a wildly ambitious engineering choice had conspired to create a machine that was simply too brittle for the world it was born into. It was a case of spectacular overreach. And yet, here we are, all these years later, still talking about it. Why? Because some cars are more than just their results. The F3L represents a dream. It's a testament to a time when designers were brave enough to prioritize beauty. They tried to build not just the fastest car, but the most beautiful one, and for a fleeting moment, they succeeded. It's the ultimate what-if story. What if they had used a more reliable engine? What if they had sorted the aerodynamics without ruining its perfect shape? It could have been one of the all-time greats. Its story serves as a powerful lesson in motorsport. Is beauty enough? Is speed enough? The F3L answers with a resounding no. A racing car has one job: to cross the finish line first. Anything else is secondary. The F3L was a triumph of design, but a failure of engineering. It proves that a car must be a complete package: fast, beautiful, and reliable. You can't win a 24-hour race with a car that can only last for 4. It's a simple, brutal truth that has defined motorsports since the very beginning. The F3L is the most stunning proof of that rule. Despite its failures, the car remains an icon. It's admired for its bravery, for its breathtaking looks, and for the sheer audacity of its concept. It's a heroically flawed machine, and we love it for that. It reminds us that sometimes the most memorable stories aren't about the winners, but about the beautiful, brilliant failures. And as the 1968 season wore on, the team knew they had one last, terrifying chance to make it work. Their next big test would be on the most dangerous circuit of them all, Le Mans. The question lingered: could this fragile beauty possibly survive the ultimate test of endurance?